Part 1. The room smelled of roasted chicken and lemon candles, a warm heavy scent that wrapped around everyone like a blanket they did not know they needed until it was gone. She sat at the far end of the long wooden table, her chair pulled back just enough to suggest she was present but not participating. Her fingers rested on her lap, quiet and still, while around her voices rose and fell like waves against a shore she had long since abandoned. It was a family gathering, the kind that happened twice a year when calendars aligned and guilt outweighed inconvenience. Children ran between rooms, their laughter sharp and sudden like breaking glass. Someone had brought a guitar and now a cousin strummed a cheerful tune that nobody knew the words to, but everyone pretended to hum along. She watched them all through half-closed eyes, not with anger, not with sadness, just with a distance that had become as familiar as her own breath. Then a small hand touched her shoulder, light as a falling leaf. She turned to see her sister's youngest child, a girl of 7 with wide curious eyes and hair the color of wheat in summer. The child smiled, a gap-toothed honest smile that held no agenda, no hidden meaning, just pure simple hope. "Will you play for us?" the girl asked, her voice soft but clear enough to cut through the room's chatter. For a moment no one heard, then the strumming stopped, the conversation stuttered, and all eyes turned to her. She felt the weight of their attention like a physical pressure on her skin. Her sister across the table gave a small encouraging nod. Her brother-in-law raised his wine glass slightly in a gesture meant to be supportive but landing somewhere near pity. She had not touched a piano in 3 years, not since the winter when ice covered the roads and the phone rang at 3 in the morning, not since the hospital waiting room with its plastic chairs and humming fluorescent lights, not since she had packed away sheet music and closed the lid on the instrument that had once been her voice. But the child still waited, her small hand now resting on the table beside her own, waiting for an answer. "Something simple," the girl added, as if sensing the hesitation in the air. "Just one song." The words hung there, simple, one song, as if music were a tap to be turned on and off, as if melodies did not carry memories, as if notes were not tiny keys that could unlock doors she had carefully locked and buried. She looked at the grand piano in the corner of the room, its black surface catching the firelight from the hearth. It stood silent and patient, like an old friend who had stopped asking why you never visited. Her throat tightened. She wanted to say no, she wanted to explain that some things cannot be simple, that music was never just notes on a page, that every chord held a season, every rhythm a heartbeat, every silence a space where someone used to be. She wanted to tell them that asking her to play was like asking a widow to describe her wedding day in 3 cheerful sentences, but the child's eyes held no malice, only expectation, the pure unguarded expectation of someone who believes adults can do anything they set their minds to. So she stood. The movement was slow, deliberate. She pushed her chair back, the legs scraping softly against the wooden floor, a sound that made several people glance up. She walked toward the piano, each step measured, each breath controlled. She could feel their eyes on her, a collective holding of breath. The room had gone quiet, not out of respect but out of anticipation. They expected something pretty, something nostalgic, something that would fit neatly into the evening's pleasant narrative. She reached the piano and lifted the fall board. The wood made a soft thud as it settled into place. She sat on the bench, adjusting its height with a practiced motion. Her body remembered what her mind tried to forget. Her hands hovered above the keys, pale slender fingers that had once danced across these same ivory surfaces with a confidence that felt like another lifetime. She closed her eyes. And for 10 long seconds she did nothing. The room waited. She could hear the crackle of the fire, the distant hum of the refrigerator, the soft shuffle of feet as someone shifted position. She could feel their impatience growing like a plant in fast motion. They wanted the music, they wanted the moment, they wanted to return to their conversations with a new story to tell later. "Remember when she played for us?" But she was not ready. Because simple was a lie. There was no such thing as a simple song, not really. A melody was never just a melody, it was the afternoon you learned it, the person who taught you, the room where you practiced, the way the light fell across the keys, the scent of rain through an open window, the feeling in your chest when you finally got the difficult passage right. Every song was a time capsule, and she had spent 3 years carefully avoiding all her time capsules. Her fingers finally touched the keys. The first note rang out clear and solitary, hanging in the air like a single drop of water falling into a deep well. It was not a folk tune, it was not a nursery rhyme, it was not the cheerful pop song someone might have expected from a casual request. It was the opening of a piece written long ago for a princess who never lived, a melody built on loss and beauty intertwined, each note placed with intention, each silence given weight. The room did not understand at first. They waited for the tune to resolve into something familiar, something they could nod along to, but it did not. It unfolded slowly, deliberately, like a flower opening in moonlight, each phrase carrying a gravity that made the cheerful lemon candle scent suddenly feel out of place. She played on. Her left hand moved beneath the right, creating a foundation of gentle sorrow, while the melody above spoke of memory and distance. She was not performing for them, she was not entertaining, she was simply remembering out loud, and in doing so she was pulling them into a space they had not agreed to enter. She saw her sister's expression change from encouragement to confusion to something deeper, a flicker of recognition, as if a door long closed had suddenly creaked open just a crack. She saw her brother-in-law set down his wine glass, his posture shifting from relaxed to rigid. She saw the child tilt her head, not with delight but with a quiet unease, the kind that comes when adults behave in ways children cannot yet name but instinctively feel. The music continued, not loud, not dramatic, but persistent, like rain against a window pane, each note a small truth she had carried alone for 3 years. She thought of winter mornings practicing before dawn while steam rose from a mug of tea. She thought of hands other than her own resting on the keys beside hers, guiding her through difficult passages. She thought of a voice saying, "You make it sound easy when it is not easy at all. Nothing worth doing ever is." Her fingers did not falter. The piece was not angry, it was not bitter, it was simply true, and truth has its own weight, its own gravity that pulls everything toward it, whether we are ready or not. As the final notes approached, she felt something shift inside her, not healing, not forgiveness, not even peace, just a quiet acknowledgement that this part of her had not died, it had only been sleeping, waiting for a reason to wake. The last chord hung in the air, vibrating through the wooden floor, through the walls, through the space between people who had forgotten how to speak to each other about the things that mattered. She lifted her hands. The silence that followed was different from the silence before. It was thicker, heavier, filled with everything that had just been said without words. She opened her eyes and saw that the room had changed, not in any visible way. The same people sat in the same chairs, the fire still burned, the candles still flickered, but something fundamental had shifted. The comfortable illusion of a simple evening had cracked, and through the crack something real had entered. She looked at the child, who now stared at her hands, not with admiration but with a dawning understanding that adults carry invisible weights. She looked at her sister, whose eyes glistened with unshed tears, not of sadness but of recognition. She looked at the piano, its keys now still, once more. And she knew with a certainty that settled deep in her bones that whatever happened next would not be simple. But for the first time in 3 years she was ready to find out what happened next. Part 2. The silence stretched longer than any of them expected. It was not the comfortable quiet that follows a pleasant song, it was the heavy stillness that comes after truth has been spoken without words, the kind of silence that makes people look at their hands or study their drinks or suddenly find the pattern on the tablecloth fascinating. No one clapped. No one said thank you. No one knew what to say, because the music had not been a performance, it had been a door opening, and they had all stepped through whether they wanted to or not. She kept her hands resting on the keys, palms down, fingers relaxed, the wood beneath her skin still humming with the memory of vibration. She did not look up, not yet. She needed these last few seconds of solitude before re-entering the world of expectations and polite conversation. Across the room a child shifted in her chair, the small movement loud in the stillness. The girl who had asked for something simple now sat very still, her small face thoughtful, not sad, not frightened, just processing something too large for her years. She had asked for a song and received instead a glimpse into an adult world of grief and memory, a world she would one day know too well. Her sister was the first to move. She reached for her wine glass, but her hand trembled slightly and she set it down again without drinking. She looked at her not with anger, not with disappointment, but with a dawning understanding that 3 years of careful avoidance had just been undone in 4 minutes of music. The brother-in-law cleared his throat, a small nervous sound meant to break the spell, but it only emphasized how deep the silence ran. He looked at his hands, the same hands that had gripped a steering wheel on an icy road, the same hands that had carried groceries and held children and now sat useless on his lap, unable to fix what could not be fixed. Someone coughed. Someone else shifted their chair. The normal sounds of a gathering trying to restart itself like an engine on a cold morning. She finally lifted her hands from the keys, the movement slow, deliberate. She placed them in her lap and looked around the room, not avoiding their eyes, not challenging them, just seeing them truly for the first time in years. She saw the discomfort, the uncertainty, the unspoken question, what do we do now? And she realized they had all been living in separate rooms within the same house, she in her room of silence, they in their room of pretending, and the music had knocked down the walls between them, leaving everyone exposed and uncertain. Her sister stood up slowly, pushing her chair back, the legs scraping against wood, a sound that made several people flinch. She walked toward the fireplace, not toward her, and stood with her back to the room, shoulders slightly raised as if against a chill that came from inside, not outside. The brother-in-law finally spoke, his voice lower than usual, softer than its usual confident tone. That was not a simple song, he said, and the words were not an accusation, they were a statement of fact, an acknowledgement that they had all just witnessed something real. She did not answer because there was nothing to say. Simple songs were for simple moments, and this had never been a simple moment, not from the beginning. The cousin with the guitar began strumming again, a cheerful tune meant to restore the evening's mood, but the notes sounded thin and false against the resonance still hanging in the air like smoke after a fire. She stood up from the piano bench, the movement fluid, natural. She did not rush, she did not hesitate, she simply rose and turned to face the room fully. For 3 years she had carried her grief like a stone in her pocket, something heavy she adjusted to with every step, something private, something hers alone. She had believed that keeping it hidden was kindness, that pretending to be fine was strength, that silence was the price of peace. But the music had changed that. The music had said, no, this is not something to carry alone, this is not something to hide, this is part of who you are now, and pretending otherwise dishonors what was lost. She looked at her sister's back, the rigid line of her shoulders, the slight tremble she tried to hide. She looked at the brother-in-law, his gaze fixed on the table, his jaw tight. She looked at the child who now watched her with eyes too old for her face, eyes that understood something had shifted in the architecture of their family. And she understood something too. The request for something simple had been innocent, but her response had not been simple because she was not simple anymore. None of them were. The accident had carved them all, changed their shapes in ways they tried to hide beneath normalcy and routine. She took a step away from the piano, then another, moving toward the center of the room, not with drama, not with anger, just with purpose. Her sister turned from the fireplace, tears tracing clean paths through her makeup. She did not wipe them away, she just stood there, breathing slowly in and out as if remembering how. I did not mean to upset anyone, she said, her voice quiet but clear. It carried through the room without effort. You did not upset us, her sister replied, the words careful, measured. You reminded us. The difference between those two statements hung in the air between them, vast and important. To upset was to cause discomfort, to remind was to bring back what had been deliberately forgotten. The brother-in-law looked up, finally meeting her eyes, his own red-rimmed and weary. I am sorry, he said, the words simple, direct, carrying the weight of 3 years of unspoken apology. She nodded, not accepting, not rejecting, just acknowledging that the words had been spoken. That was enough for now, more than enough. The child stood up and walked to her side, small hand reaching for hers, their fingers intertwined naturally, the child's palm warm and trusting. Will you teach me, she asked, not to play that song, not something sad, but just to play. The question was a bridge, a way forward, not backward. She squeezed the small hand gently. Yes, she said, when you are ready. And in that moment she understood why she had played, not to punish, not to accuse, not to break the evening's pleasant mood, but to break the silence that had grown too heavy to carry alone. She had played because music was her language, and for 3 years she had been mute, and a person cannot live forever without speaking their truth. The room began to breathe again slowly, carefully. People resumed their conversations, not the loud cheerful talk from before but something quieter, more real. A woman asked her sister about a recipe, her voice gentle. A man discussed the weather with the brother-in-law, his tone lacking its usual edge. The cousin put the guitar aside and simply sat listening. No one mentioned the music again, not directly, but it remained in the room like a third presence, changing the quality of light, changing the space between words, changing what was possible. She sat back at the table, not at the far end this time but beside her sister, their shoulders almost touching, not quite but close enough to feel the warmth between them. Her sister reached over and covered her hand with her own, the gesture simple, wordless, full of everything they could not yet say aloud. Outside the window night had fully fallen, stars pricked the dark sky, cold and distant but beautiful in their constancy. She thought about the days ahead, the conversations that would need to happen, the tears that would need to be shed, the forgiveness that would need to be given and received. She thought about the piano waiting in the corner, no longer a monument to loss but simply an instrument again, a tool for expression, not a tombstone. The child leaned against her side, drowsy now, the excitement of the evening giving way to fatigue. She rested her head on her arm trustingly, completely. She looked around the room at these people who were her family, flawed, complicated, carrying their own invisible weights, and she felt something shift inside her, not healing, not yet, but the possibility of healing, which was its own kind of beginning. The evening would end soon, people would gather coats and exchange hugs and promises to visit again soon, but this time the promises would carry more weight, this time the hugs would last a moment longer, this time they would all carry with them the memory of music that was not simple and the understanding that some things should not be simple. She had been asked to play something simple. She had played the truth instead. And the truth, though heavy, had lifted something from her chest, a weight she had not known she was still carrying until it was gone. The room was no longer silent, but the silence inside her had finally begun to speak. Part 3. The morning light came soft through the kitchen window, painting the walls in pale gold. She stood at the counter watching steam rise from a mug of tea, her hands wrapped around the warmth, something she had not allowed herself to feel in a long time, comfort without guilt. Last night had changed the air in the house, not dramatically, not with fanfare, but with a quiet shift, like the moment after rain when the world smells different, cleaner, heavier with possibility. She had slept through the night for the first time in years, no waking at 3 a.m. staring at the ceiling, no dreams of screeching tires or hospital corridors, just deep unbroken rest, her body remembering what peace felt like. Down the hall a floorboard creaked, then another, small careful steps approaching the kitchen. Her niece entered the room, hair tousled from sleep, eyes still heavy with dreams. She carried a stuffed rabbit by one ear, its fur worn smooth from years of love. The child did not speak right away. She climbed onto a chair pulled close to the table.